or left blank, what is the penalty? The penalty as per the amendment is 25,000 rupees fine maximum, or means which may not be 1 month imprisonment. Now, in that case, there is no rules have been formulated as to who will be the complainant. 7 years down the line, Punjab government has not even formulated the rules. How do you go in for prosecution? How do you implement what you have legislated? Now, these are the areas which we will be taking up, obviously, that the rules should be implemented, and the complainant should be not the person, the stakeholder, it can be a third person also. Because this has to be taken seriously. Unfortunately, most of our policies, our laws are not implemented in Pakistan, primarily because there is no accountability mechanism. The justice system, unfortunately, many of you will be part of that, is extremely, let me use this word, extremely poor. It takes decades for anyone to even decide the cases, even to go in for penalty. I had a discussion, I would request the Masawi to also look into that, how the Nikah registrars are appointed. Is it a favor? Are they appointed on political basis, or is there a competition, fair competition? Is there any base qualification of a Nikah registrar? Whether he has to be literate, whether he has to be graduate, or whether illiterate person can be a Nikah registrar. So these are because it's very lucrative. When one union council, which comprises of 10 to 12 villages, there could be daily 3-4 Nikah namas coming in for registration, and that would entail a lot of money. We may be earning in lakhs per month. So these are the issues which we need to inquire into, and then recommend to the government also that look into it. So having said that, I think it's a very good start which have been made. And regarding the missing CNAC, I'll just take 2 more points, and which have really struck me. One is that the non-existence of CNACs on the 48% of Nikah namas who were registered. This is something which is very alarming. So this could entail that there will be a number of marriages which are child marriages taking place. Number 2, which is even more significant, is that in 74% of registered Nikah namas, there was no date of registration. Now this is a very deep-rooted sort of a thing. Why there is no date of registration on Nikah nama? There is a date of solemnization of marriage, of Nikah. And number 2, date is missing because most of the Nikah, after the Nikah takes place, they keep that Nikah nama with themselves for months and years at a time. And only if there is some sort of a compulsion, someone has to go abroad, someone has to apply for a visa, or there's something, only then they would, go to the union council, take it and have it registered. So this non-existence or non-filling in of date of registration is deliberate in most cases. It is just because there is a time limit, you have to get it registered or entail penalty. So this is all deliberate. This need to be said, and we need to also, I will also, I think, suggest to Masawi to also go and examine the unregistered Nikah namas with the Nikah of the local mosque, if they can get hold of that. That would be something which would be, and I think, eye-opener in the sense that most of the Nikah, maybe in large percentage, Nikah has taken place but has not gone for registration. So these are the issues where I think which are indicative of something seriously wrong and serious exploitation or non-following of the procedures, and which have a lot of implications. Having said that, I think they have, I think, aptly pointed out that culturally it is considered still a no-go area for the bride to come in and to discuss. It is left to her elders, may it be his father or maybe uncles, to decide what the haq mehr would be, which is the right of the wife. And the provision in the ML laws 2015 is totally vague. In the sense I was reading that, needs to be totally revamped, redrafted. This is the right of the wife to go in for and tell that it's not the parents or the guardian to decide on her behalf. At least she should be consulted and her willingness, consent should be there. Then is regarding the maintenance of wife, which is, I think in 4% of cases it is being recorded. In most of the Nikah, there is no, they think that the wife or the parents are very demanding if they say demand maintenance allowance for the girl. So these are issues which are social and cultural taboos which we need to now tackle them head on, and a very challenging uphill task. So but I always say that even if we are able to make 10 to 20% difference, I think it will be a tremendous headway. But at the policy making level, we will definitely go to the provincial government and impress upon them to take these measures to implement whatever law in its present form is and go for amendment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your thoughts. I think you've shed a lot of light on the reasons of non-implementation. We'll hopefully come back to you once again, but I'd now move to Fawzia. I mean, the opening question is the same. How do you see the data and the diagnostic? But also if you can, maybe talk about your effort as the chairperson of the commission, the Women's Commission in Punjab, working with the Nikah registrars, union councils, and in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Amar. And you're very right that Nadeem Saab has captured most of it. But when you asked me what my thoughts were on this entire question, an Urdu poetry verse came to mind, which is also a song, "Kahan tak sunoge, kahan tak sunaye," which is how much are you going to hear? And I have lots to tell, and there's hazaron hi shikwe hain, kya bataएं. Magar having said that, first of all, I feel like it's not such a big problem. And I am saying that based on my experience of having worked with 39,000 Nikah registrars and 10,000 union council officials in Punjab province only. And the reason why I'm saying that is that I see the central problem as being lack of compliance, which comes from lack of oversight. Laws are okay. Yes, there is one major gap that you don't have the age of marriage as 18 in the Nikah Nama, which would make that provision in column 4 of the CNIC a little more effective, because if the girl's age of marriage is going to be 16, how can you ask for a CNIC, right? So therefore the compliance, we provide for a loophole in compliance because of that loophole in the law, right? So the law, apart from that, the law is okay. It's really the implementation of the law. And who is responsible for the implementation of law? Two elements come to mind, and I think the first element is going to be more effective if we work with that. That is the administration. I see it as absolutely the failure of administration when Nikah Namas are not being registered, when child marriages are happening, and rights of women are not being guaranteed in the Nikah Nama. Because I feel like the Nikah Nama is the fountain of rights for women and men both, but women more so in Pakistan, where women have relatively less protected rights. And I see four fundamental rights that arise from the Nikah Nama. They've been mentioned here. One of that is the right to be protected from early, forced and child marriage. It's not just, child marriage, it is also forced marriage. Because the whole concept of consent is reliant on that. And we have the Child Marriage Restraint Act of 1929, the Punjab Marriage Restraint Act of Amendment Act of 2015. On top of that, we have 310A, the PPC 310A, which also talk about the right to be protected from forced marriage, like in conditions of badle sul, swani, swara, etc. So we have that aspect that is covered by the Nikah Nama. We have the protection of a woman's social rights. For example, in cases of polygamy, there are conditionalities which a Nikah Nama, if filled properly, can be enforced. The delegated right of divorce, of course, the rights or the conditions in which khula can happen, the dower, how much is going to go into that, and the condition for work. But more importantly, I feel like the Nikah Nama provides you the financial rights, which if it is not filled correctly, are taken away from you. Because the Nikah-nama provides for recording of what maintenance will be set, what gifts the wife can have, and asks to attach title deeds, etc. If you are gifting any property to a woman, to provide the relevant documentation with the Nikah-nama. It asks for various other economic securities that can be in any other condition, sort of a thing that can be added to in that. And of course the dower, the amount of dower that is fixed, that is also one of the financial rights that is given. The one right that I feel the Nikah-nama and the marriage laws do not give at the moment is the right to marital property and the right to alimony, which by the way are given in many Muslim countries. Many Muslim countries, I'm sure you are law students and I'm not. I mean, I'm a student of law, but I don't have training in law. Many Muslim countries provide the right to marital properties. And the Muslim communities, even in other countries which are not Muslim countries like Singapore, get that right to marital property within their own laws. We don't have any concept of a woman getting ownership of marital property. And when she is divorced, because she doesn't have ownership, she has no right to claim that. Right? She doesn't have the right to alimony despite putting in 40 years of quote-unquote service in the marriage, despite there being many provisions that can be, applied loosely, but the law does not give her that. And I feel like whether it is NCHR or it is NCSW or it is other organizations as well as academic institutions, they need to work on those fundamental economic rights within marriage that I feel are absolutely denied to Pakistani women across the board. So anyway, so then I'm just going to come back to the failure of administration, and that I'm going to rest on as I said earlier, my work with the Nikah registrars in Punjab. We wanted to deal with this problem where delegated right of divorce was not being given. And I think it started in 1989 when I got married, because a friend of mine said, you're getting married, get the delegated right to divorce, which is talaq-e-tafweez. And I said, okay, fine, because I've always been a women's rights advocate and activist. So I said, sure. So I spoke with my soon-to-be husband, and I said, I'm going to get the delegated right of divorce. He's not a law student, but he got lots of books on law, and he says, my God, she's asking for a divorce already. And he looked at the provisions, and he realized, no, it doesn't mean that she's going to necessarily demand a divorce very soon. And it's been 33 and a half years, I'm still married. I haven't divorced, right? So having a right does not mean that you're necessarily going to break up a marriage, as you all know. So anyway, so when I asked him this, after reading many books and law, he came back to me and he says, sure, you know what, it's your right. Let's agree upon it, that when the Nikah-nama comes, you ask for that right. Anyway, the day of the marriage comes and the day of Nikah, and I'm in a room, in walks one of my relatives with the Nikah-nama that has been previously filled, by the way. And the delegated right of divorce, column 18, has been struck off, like in your various Nikah-namas. So I unstruck it, and I said, usme tha ki bhai aapko talaq ka haq chahiye, do you want the delegated talaq-e-tafweez ka, do you want the delegated right of divorce? And I said, yes, haan, usme maine likha, and then I just sent it back. Of course, the Nikah registrar said, who was also the Nikah khwan, he said, I'm not going to preside on this marriage because of the fact that ye to gair Islami and this is gair Islami. I'm not going to go through this with this. So then the family said, that's not for you to decide. That right that many % of your Nikah registrars felt they had to negotiate the terms of the Nikah, that is not their right. And who needs to tell them? The government needs to tell them. The girl needs to tell them, the boy needs to tell them, their families need to tell them, but most importantly, the government needs to enforce the writ of law. It's not very hard. If we can have one dish all across, hamari to zindagi azab bani hai, whenever we go to a marriage, there is one dish, Why can we not have a legal document enforced? So anyway, so based on that, we said, okay, let's look at these Nikah registrars and find out what's happening over there. And we realized there is absolutely no record of how many Nikah registrars we have. local government and community development department provides registration to those nikah. They take money from us. Abhi, my son got married, 10,000 rupees usne humse liye, which is not the fee, legal fee, of course, but they managed to take it from you. But anyway, and so we said, okay, let's start counting how many nikah registrars we have. And we found out there were 39,000 nikah registrars. And local government and community development department said, thank you so much. We never knew how many nikah registrations we had done, So we said, well, you should have found out. But anyway, it was very kind of them, and the commission worked with them. We find that 10,000 UC officials, Union Council officials, jointly in the law, they have the responsibility to register the nikah namas, And Fatma has talked about it, Nadeem Saab has talked about it. What happens? Some are registered, some are not registered, they are inaccurately registered. When Umar asked me this question, what are my thoughts? I said, I was shocked to find out nothing has changed, despite the fact that an initiative was started. But it could have changed. What happened was disruption happened, Governments changed, things stalled. Change had started to show, because when we went to the nikah registrars and we brought them into training, we did the prior assessment, etc. We brought them into training. They thought they could negotiate the terms of the marriage, but when we told them, no, you can't. The law is there. Your job is to just register the marriage in an official manner for which you have liability. If you don't, you have saza, and you have fine also. Some of them threatened to walk out, and we said, sure, because behind me was the writ of the government. I'm nobody, I'm a nobody, but behind me was the writ of the government. So we said, okay, fine, we'll cancel your nikah registration, and you do whatever. If you don't believe in age of marriage as even being 16, because they felt puberty should be the age of marriage. If you don't believe in the delegated right of divorce, you surrender your registration or we will cancel it for you, And then, so anyway, a lot of them fell in line. Some of them, one of them, as far as I can remember, we ran trainings on about 26,000 nikah registrars and UC officials in 21 districts. The remaining 15 are still not done, unfortunately. There was at least one incident which I remember that one of them resigned. He said, I did not realize mere pe itni zimmedari hai that I am responsible for so much and there is liability, So I'm going to resign because this is too much responsibility. He got frightened, which is maybe it would be good to still have him around because he seemed to have a conscience. Anyway, so just coming and winding up because I know you guys must be bored also. I feel that if you tighten oversight, you will ensure compliance. You will be able to support the many percentages of girls from rich and poor backgrounds who don't have the courage to ask for a reasonable dower, to ask for the delegated right of divorce, and to put conditions in marriage. Government can help us do that. Unfortunately, the government is not playing its part. We keep asking, we as civil society keep asking for laws, and the government is happy to pass laws because the problem is not laws. The problem is the compliance and the implementation of laws, right? So there is that, and then there are, of course, finally, a few procedural issues also. Nadeem Saab very rightly mentioned that there are no criteria for registration of the nikah registrar. We've left it open. You have to write it right and you have to submit it. There were a few instances when the nikah registrar was blind and he didn't even know Braille. So how is he going to register nikah? So we have no criteria. The bylaws, I think that is governed by the local government bylaws. So the local government bylaws need to start with some criteria for the nikah registrar to be registered. Then we need to have within those bylaws, we need to have oversight mechanisms so that there is constant checking of what they are doing, right? And then of course, punishments need to be enforced. मैं तो कहती हूँ 1 महीने की है और वो 25,000 रुपया जुर्माना है. Let it happen because it is not the severity of the law but the certainty of law which makes people refrain from doing things, right? So we need to take care of some procedural lacuna. We need to perhaps increase the age of marriage, but I would recommend let's not focus on that right now. Let's enforce the law as it is right now. We need to do that. And finally, awareness is very important. It becomes a buzzword, but all of you sitting here, you have a responsibility to go and talk to people who are getting married around you, left, right, and center, and of course some of you are still going to be married. Just take up that stance. It's not such a big deal, Just ask for that, and especially what will happen is, at least the nikah registrar will find that there is resistance. Many a time the resistance is not from your fiancés, it is from the nikah registrar, and in order to change that, at least you will have contributed a little bit. Thank you, Umar. I think that's all from me.
Thank you. I think very important insights, and I think one of the most important points is the emphasis on a compliance mechanism. Development sector generally has a romance with capacity building. We don't realize the limitations of capacity building, especially when you are engaging with such deep-rooted cultural, religious biases, assuming that you're going to change how someone has been raised in the society for decades in maybe 1 or 2 days of training is very difficult. And I think we have evidence. If yours was the district that this diagnostic is from, we know that capacity building clearly hasn't worked there. Yeah. So I think it's very important for the government to ensure that the rate of the state is followed in letter and spirit. So I'll pass it on to Dareen. Dareen, you've worked in different jurisdictions. Has there been a jurisdiction which is like Pakistan? And what are the best practices? Like, do these problems look familiar to you?
Thanks, Omar. I think, so I worked on women's rights in general, not necessarily women's right in marriage. And the 3 countries where I focused a lot were Iraq, Lebanon, where I come from, and Tunisia. And what has been presented resonates a lot because for me, I agree with my colleagues that there's a problem of compliance and enforcement and procedures, and documentation. But there's also a larger problem, which is the problem of value systems and behavior that are not necessarily impacted by religion. They're also impacted by education, socioeconomic status, regionalism, from which era you're from. For example, in my home country where I was born, we have 18 acknowledged communities, religious communities. Some of them are ethno-religious. And each one of them, because we don't have one system that actually treats them equally, so each one of them has their own religious court system. Whether you like that system, you're against it or not, I'm not here to say what's my position. But in different court systems of different religions, sometimes these sentences align and are actually ending up in giving a just outcome for women, just because if you look at the background of the judges, they share a lot of common traits, which are, they are, for example, from a certain educational establishment, they are from a certain, regional background or socioeconomic status. So the behavior and the attitudes are not only or necessarily impacted by religion. I'm a big believer that we all need spirituality in our lives. That's basically the pyramid of the needs that says that. That's not me. So I don't think that vices are necessarily coming from religion. Vices or the unjust decisions are coming from different factors. So these numbers shows that the same thing that impact the decisions in Lebanon, the court systems, are as well shared here. And I go further a bit that in Iraq, pre-2003, pre-fall of the regime, there was one civil law that actually was enforced by Saddam Hussein over all of Iraq that actually imposed on people to marry civil, and optional was the religious marriage. So if they were to go to the court for any of the legal rights, if they were to enforce any of the legal rights, they have to go to court. Post-2003, when the chaos happened, power dynamic change, and courts were destroyed, you've seen the trend of the behavior coming back, the social constraints coming back. So this also is a parallel conclusion that it resonated a lot when the results came out. The second thing I wanted to say is that it is important to stress on the accountability, but I also think that the accountability goes both ways. In many of the jurisdictions that I worked in, and not necessarily on women's rights only, I've seen a common thread, which is when people lose trust in the system overall, they lose trust in everything, so they don't feel that they need to enforce any law. It's just a general comprehensive feeling that they have. If they don't feel that the government is giving them protection for their economic and social rights and access to services, etc., the marriage issue, unfortunately, becomes a minor thing because least of the priorities. And that's a trend. That's not something that I am inventing here. And I'm not saying that we should cover all of these issues, but I'm just saying that this is a contextual trend that I've noticed in 7 countries I worked in. The last thing I wanted to also say is that we need to enforce accountability and oversight. That's correct. But I also think we need to engage in a dialogue with the people that are basically contributing to unjust decisions that are affecting women. Because in many instances, the reasons are lack of awareness, the reasons are misinterpretations of the law, but also injecting misconceptions in the law. And that gap between the agents that are responsible to enforce the law and the victims that are affected needs to be closed. And us as a civil society can play a big role there.
Thank you, Doreen. I think a significant point, and Nadeem Saab, Fawzia, I'd like you to comment on this, that accountability and government doing its implementation business becomes difficult if people do not trust the law. And I think that's quite evident in the surveys and the nikah forms that were evaluated as well. There were some questions where a significant majority felt the significant majority knew the law, but still were not following it because they felt it went against their perceptions, religious or cultural perceptions. So as government, how do you engage with it? And I think a broader question, which may be a difficult question to answer, is what is the role of religion in this entire debate? And how do we engage with it? So first, Nadeem Saab, you, Fawzia, then you.
So you have raised a very, it's a very sensitive also, and it's a very wide-ranging sort of question. First part of let me answer the first part. Those who are law students here would know that all laws should also have some social and ethical backings also. And obviously, if the society or the norm use the word challenging, the laws are there, and everyone, is by and large, they have the training, as Fawzia Sahiba has said, but she was the chairperson of the Women Status Commission. I think that commendable trainings have taken place. But the issue also is that there is a psychological bar or social bar to fully implement those provisions. So in this case, many of you, the survey also points out that majority of people think that these consent is not very relevant. Only 40% think that consent is relevant. Now this is very strange, because the basic concept, even if our forefathers go 2 decades back, is offer and acceptance. So, but here is, I think these also, there is a mix of Hindu culture in our society, where the women are not given, they are not considered as independent entities. We have talked about religion. Uma, I think it's very important. Let me make a statement. You may dispute it with, but I'll make a statement. Here we are sitting in 2022, trying to implement the women rights which were given 1500 years back. Now, this is what we are doing. In fact, that the right of meher, right of khula at that time, independent right of property, I think Fazil Wakar has raised another very issue, that marital property, but at that time there were business women. I always give an example that Hazrat Khadija Raziyallahu Ta'ala anha, she proposed the marriage. So this we are talking about 1500 years. There was no stigma attached to it that the wife is as much as a party to this marriage nikah contract. So this is what we are doing. And why this is happening? This is happening primarily because, number one, there are a lot of illiteracy, a lot of false notions, a lot of cultural traditions, or I would say wrong cultural traditions which have come up in the subcontinent last 200 years. So these are the issues we have to, now how do we overcome that? One is we go in and do it in a very slow manner, which we call incremental change or transition. It may take decades for the culture and society to reform, and they start giving these rights to the women. Even now there are instances of reduction in arranged marriages, where there are less arranged marriages. The voice of the wife and the boy becomes, they're more frank with each other. They can tell them these are the conditions. But that will take a long time. So as the answer to your next question is, how do we do it? I think the only thing is, as was mentioned here, that all of us wear seat belts now. 20 years ago, no one was wearing a seat belt. All of us now follow lanes when we are traveling in motorway. No one was doing that before the motorways. So there has to be a will of state. The word mentioned was failure of the government. I totally agree. It's a failure of the government. And it is a very doable. It is not also, now the only thing is that people know that they will have to get their nikah namas registered. Where is the catch? You have to get hold of the catch where that anyone who wants to maybe get their children registered, admitted to schools, go abroad, whatever, so they need a registered marriage certificate. So that is the catch. And the people who are involved in nikah solemnization, nikah registration, and issuance of computerized cards should be got hold of. That is all. Cancel their license, give them penal action, and we would not require a very extensive penal action against thousands of people. There are a few samples, maybe 15, 20, and publicizing that. I think that will be, we will be, achieving our targets in a short manner, and this is something which can be done wherever there is a will of the state. Now let me show where is the will of state. Our people, this is maybe not a very proper example, but we are not used to discipline in terms of forming queues, in terms of following the lanes, in terms of parking rules. But our people, when they go to countries where there is zero tolerance to such violations, they follow that. So this is where we need to now, because there is an increasing incidence. Now let me give the positive side. There is an increasing trend in registration of individuals, of children, of minors. The unregistered persons now percentage is reducing. Similarly, there is an increase in registration of marriages also. But there would be still, so ultimately, maybe in 5 years' time, maybe 90 or 95% marriages will be registered. So this is, I think, we should focus on that, and that will definitely be helpful.
Thank you, sir.
So, I think I'm going to try and link the two questions that you had. Ek to about this resistance because of the lack of faith in government, and then the religious element. I think first and foremost, now there is a recognition that women do have rights. And even though because of the inherent patriarchy and the privileges that people lose, there is a resistance to it, and sometimes the cover of religion is used in order to deny those rights. Because I feel that the rights currently given in marriage are absolutely in consonance with the principles of Islam, because none of our laws, according to the Constitution, can be outside the framework of Islam, right? So we have absolutely no conflict. We say that in CDOG reporting also that we do, and we are asked to, waive off this condition. But for us, all laws have to be in consonance with the injunctions of Islam. So there are no rights here which are given in MFLO or CMLA, CMRA, I mean, that are against Islam. There's no conflict with that. Secondly, while we do face a crisis of governance generally and people's loss of faith and lack of faith in the government, but that is irrespective of women's rights. It's in every area, right? So we are going to assume that there is no inherent problem over that. It's a general problem, and this tarah se we are trying to go for other implementation of other laws. We are going to go for this one also. Therefore, we should continue to focus on implementation of law, knowing that there isn't any inherent problem. There is no real challenge in that. And for that, it's best not to go to people's thinking, but to go with the laws which are the writ of the state, right? So let's just, because I've done women's rights for all my life, and I feel that the moment you start engaging with subjectives, you lose the battle, because your interpretation of Islam will be very different from mine. So let's go by what has been agreed upon by the state itself and go for the enforcement of that. In terms of strategy, I'm certainly not saying that enforcement is the only solution. I'm saying it's the most important solution in my point of view, along with a multi-pronged approach, which is go for capacity building for sure. Because while, the numbers are not very heartening, I feel like if the 39,000 had been trained, one more accountability round and we would have seen a major change. And COVID is another example. When the person who drives a rickshaw, who does not believe in vaccination because sees it as an American agenda, when he doesn't get fuel unless he shows the COVID certificate, he goes running and takes the certificate. We've had that, we've had really good enforcement of that. So I feel like awareness, capacity building, enforcement of laws, these will go hand in hand in not just changing the social norms, but also the enforcement of law as we have today. That's all.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, the vaccination is not an American agenda, it's Bill Gates' conspiracy. Yeah, particularly. Certainly I agree with you that enforcement is not the only solution, but oversight is, probably the lowest hanging fruit, and other tools like capacity building, etc. are important. Dareen, you made a point that the biases are not just based on religion, but again, your experience in other countries, if the bias is religious in nature, what has been your experience of engaging with it? Because it seems that, Fawzia thinks that we shouldn't indulge in subjectives. It probably confuses the message.
I haven't been able to explain it very well. We do engage with, for instance, even in this strategy, we engage with religion in order to remove misconceptions that are presented in the form of religious injunctions, right? So, like I said earlier, consent is a fundamental right in marriage that was given to women by Islam. In that, generally it is said that, similarly, the puberty thing, laws have been changed, various religious arguments have been given, we use that, and only to protect the law, to promote the law that we have in place. Yes, sir.
Thank you for the clarification. Dareen?
Yeah, I didn't hint to the idea that every intervention in women's rights, specifically marriage rights, needs to only focus on religion. What I meant to say is that, and I'm continuing to learn more about Pakistan, so I'm not the expert here, but from previous experience, it is the religious element affects a lot the way we see women and we see each other and behave. It's one of the factors. Again, I really think that from the 18 communities that I mentioned as an example in Lebanon, it would be 2 different courts, and people would expect a certain decision from one court, for example, over a divorce case or alimony or custody, and it would come out different because if you investigate a bit further, the judge in that court is from a certain social status, education, from a certain region. So a lot of other elements affect the way we behave and think about things. But the religion, at least where I come from, and the Middle East overall, is there. It's in our face. So we can't just dismiss it. We need to basically engage with it. And I cannot agree more that we need to engage with it by using the true essence of the religion itself, which I think all of us agree that all religion are aiming for the greater good and for peace and love. So that is the rhetoric that I wanted to say, because every women's rights project I was engaged in, we had to be impactful, especially in some certain areas in the Middle East. We had to rely on figures that had influence over some constituencies. And that's actually not bad. That's actually a good thing, because if we don't engage, then we're dismissing, then we're creating this cleavage that, oh, these are the secular people, they think that way. And we are also furthering ourselves from them thinking, oh, these are the radical, they think that way. In fact, when we sit with many of them, we feel that we have more in common than we would ever think. So that was my point, and that's also an example you asked about. But I wanted to say that, for example, in Lebanon, in a very complicated country, you are here way more advanced than us, because when we first started speaking about a civil law that standardized marriages, women's rights, and legal rights coming from marriage, both the Christian and the Muslim religious establishments were against, because it wasn't only about it was mainly for them about stripping away their power and influence, because they are the one conducting their marriages and actually managing the marriage contract. Yet you see a high number of Lebanese couples going to Cyprus to do civil marriage and coming back to Lebanon not doing any religious marriage. So the de facto trend now, especially with young generation, is that we don't want religious marriages. So in that situation, there's a de facto thing happening, but there is also the jure thing still there. However, with the caveat that when the rhetoric and the narrative of some civil society happened and started pushing for a civil law that standardized the marriages, and when I say standardized, because women's right in marriage in Lebanon depends where you're from, depends what religious community you're from. So if my mom or I wanted a divorce as a raised Christian, the court will rule differently if I was a Muslim. And that's the injustice that the civil society was also talking about. But when the civil society was trying to advocate for that, there was a huge tension with the religious establishment, not even them, with communities, including my parents, who thought, oh, you're preaching about secularism, that means you don't want us to go to church or you don't want us to go to mosque. And we never engage on what does that mean, what it means to have a civil law. So we left, still till now, we left it as this taboo that we don't want to engage in. Whereas if you issue a civil law as the rule, and you still give people the option of conducting religious marriages, and you include in the civil law things that don't go against any of the 18 communities in Lebanon, which is probably a very difficult mission, you could easily probably get to this law. But this gap of not engaging and people getting frightened from the word secularism, which is not the correct word to use, it's more the civil law, has basically been a handicap. So that's why I'm saying there's a power for religion, whether we want it or not.
Thank you, Doreen. Unfortunately, our time is over. I would like to thank the panelists. I apologize to the participants, but we will give you access to the panelists. You can jump over and informally ask questions. The closing ceremony will start in 10 minutes. So may I request you to stay around this place? Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Yeah.